Hiya! Today I am bringing you my review of the movie Meg, which is the adaptation of Steve Alten's book, The Meg. So I went to go see Meg on opening night because I've been anticipating this movie since it was announced like 2 years ago, I think. I have loved the Meg books for years, and they actually came out, I think, in the 90s. So I'm not sure why it took so long for it to become a movie, considering like the popularity of Jaws and other monster movies. So I was a little confused about that. Overall review of it is that I really liked it. I thought they did a good job. There were some things that I thought were missing, and not in the book did it better sort of way, just in a cinematic sense. Like, for one thing, I think they removed a lot of the blood and gore that you would expect from that kind of movie in order to keep it a PG-13 movie, which I was a little bit disappointed by. I kind of wish they would have let it be an R movie if that's what it took to have that element in it, because it just felt like something was missing. Disclaimer that I may be a little bit biased because I've always been fascinated by the idea of the megalodon and sea monsters in general. So I love sea monster movies, and I'm constantly like looking for sea monster books and sea monster movies. Anything that's done even moderately well, I'll think is fantastic, because some of them are done really poorly. And to be fair, I do love B-movie monster movies. Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus, I actually really like that one. But I like it because it's cheesy, not because I think it's a good cinematic experience. I just like it because it's enjoyable and it's fun. So now I'm going to go into some of the stuff that might be considered kind of spoilery. So if you don't want to be spoiled and you haven't seen the movie, come back when you've watched it and we'll chat. The first thing that I want to say, because it happened so early in the movie, was that certain characters really connected with the audience really quickly. Like Toshi, who's in the sub with Jonas's ex-wife, and Jonas is going to rescue them, but he sacrifices himself for the team. He died so quickly, but there was still like this instant connection, and you really felt. And I think if that hadn't been done effectively, his self-sacrifice and the mourning of the other characters wouldn't have been believable. I really do think that the actor who portrayed Toshi, who is the same actor who portrays Hiro in Heroes, did a really effective job. Something that is kind of amazing to me about Steve Alten is that even though he is one of those writers where you kind of always know that the main character is safe and you don't really worry that they're gonna die, he still manages to like maintain this intense suspense in the action scenes, and I think that carried over into the movies. I mean, obviously you sit there and you think like Jonas isn't gonna die. First of all, the movie's not even close to over. Jonas isn't gonna die, but you're still sort of like holding your breath because you're like, what's gonna happen? Which leads me to another thing, that the CGI was really good. I was really impressed with the CGI, because if you've seen 47 Meters Down, that CGI I don't think was done that well. There are parts of that movie that are really, really poorly done. And Deep Blue Sea 2, same thing. Some of the shark CGI is just awful. But the CGI of the shark, I felt, was honestly so good. And then that combined with the suspense, like I actually physically jumped at times. Even though I knew the book and I knew what was going to happen and I knew how it would all turn out, but there were still some things that were just so suspenseful that I jumped. I knew what was going to happen to an extent, but they still changed some things. One of the character deaths, I was kind of surprised that they did, because that character has things to do in other books, but I guess they wanted to combine two of the characters in the book, and anyway, cinematic reasons, whatever. So they changed some things, but I really feel like they captured the essence of the book, like that actiony alpha male hero Jonas with the sarcastic badass female protagonist alongside of him fighting this shark that's just like killing machine, because I mean that's the megalodon was the apex predator, and now it's going up to the surface where it's confronted with another apex predator, man, and sort of the collision of those two apex predators and what that would mean. Speaking of the female protagonist, Suyin was portrayed amazingly, I felt. As a female protagonist, she is one of those protagonists who is very badass, and she's very brave and intelligent and sarcastic, and there's a lot of like these cheeky moments of her sort of calling Jonas out on his alpha male stereotypical societal role. At one point she's like talking to him about something and he was like, do you really mean that? And she's like, no, but I didn't want to hurt your manhood, basically. So those parts I thought were really great because it was very cheeky, and that's definitely something in Steve Alten too. He's got some cheesy dialogue, but he's a bit cheeky. Rainn Wilson from The Office plays the millionaire who is kind of the villain in the movie. He's not exactly the villain. The shark's not really the villain. It's sort of like everybody's kind of the villain to some degree. I feel like man in general is the villain in that because it messed with nature. The hubristic millionaire is the closest we get to a true villain because he's not listening to anyone. He causes the death of so many people, and I think he did such a great job, a believable job, in being the hubristic comedic millionaire because he's so over the top that it's just funny. And like I said, Jason Statham plays Jonas, and Jonas is an alpha male in a very stereotypical manner. He's kind of 2D, that like stereotypical like gung-ho action hero type, and he is that way in the book as well, but I feel like it can be very difficult to lend some depth to that character in a film, and I thought Jason Statham did a really great job. Like, you didn't feel like there was nothing to Jonas. It was deeper. At the end, the setup for the sequel was so subtle that I feel like only people who have read the books might have picked up on it, or like if you've watched it multiple times, maybe you'd see it, but because there's so much frenzy going on with all the sharks eating the megalodon, I feel like you wouldn't catch it unless you were looking for it, because I kept waiting for the baby to drop out of the stomach, and I had forgotten, which I think this is how it happened in the book too, but the baby swims out of the mouth, and when I was talking to my boyfriend after the movie, he said he thought that was just one of the sharks that was eating the shark. That was a female megalodon who was pregnant, and now there's a baby megalodon on the loose. There were some downsides, of course, as with anything. The deaths were a bit predictable, which Steve Alten's books can be a bit predictable. They're very formulaic, and the deaths follow that formula of a typical thriller. You generally know who's going to die, and also a lot of it was cliche, which made other parts of the movie very predictable. But to be fair, I wish it had been turned into a film earlier, because it could have ridden the wave of some of the other like monster thrillers that were popular at the time, because now, of course, it is a little bit cliche. The other thing that I mentioned earlier about there being a lack of blood and gore, and I think that was to keep it a PG-13 movie, but when a shark eats someone, even if they eat them whole, which the shark didn't always eat the person whole, there should be some sort of blood. Even if they eat them whole, like when they open their mouth again, you would think that something would come up. And they didn't kind of show the aftermath of the different attacks as much as like with Jaws. In Jaws, you see a lot of the trauma that happens after the attack, whereas like with Megalodon, they show the beach scene, and then as the shark's swimming away, everyone's just sort of like in that group there, looking relieved and scared, but relieved, and it doesn't show sort of frenzy that you expect. And then there's something that I kind of thought was a little bit of a plot hole, and I don't remember if it was explained in the book or not, because it has been a while since I read the book. There's that moment where they distract the shark from the beachgoers with the sounds of whales mating. And I don't really understand. The shark was right there about to get the prey, and for some reason the potential prey lured him away from the actual prey that he was about to actually bite, which didn't make any sense to me. And maybe there's like a marine biological reason for that, and I just don't know it, but that to me seemed sort of like a bit of a plot hole. Overall though, and I'm a big proponent of this in general, but overall, if you keep your expectations realistic, like The Meg is not going to be the next Citizen Kane, it's not going to be Casablanca or The Lord of the Rings. It's not this epic cinematic film. It is a summer blockbuster thriller, and if you take it for what it is, I think it was really well done, and I think it was a really fun, escapist experience. So that is my review on the Meg movie based on the book The Meg by Steve Alten, which I think, like I said before, I think they set up for sequels, so if this one does well, I assume that they're going to continue adapting his books into the films. But in the meantime, as always, there are so many books and so little time, so I'm gonna go read, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!